back at January Giallo.
Hey, I'm Brandon, back with another video for Film Archaeology, and I just want to have a chat about Blood and Black Lace. So I got to actually see this movie on the big screen at the Music Box in Chicago. I had seen it before. I've got the Arrow 4K that was in really high demand last year, and had watched it actually once, just taking the movie in, and then again with a commentary on, and then now seeing it a third time in theaters. And this is actually a movie that I think gets better the more that you see it. I really liked it the first time, but now having seen it in the theater and just kind of being able to stew on it, get away from it, like understand the flow of the movie, I think this is a really elegant giallo. And as anybody who follows the genre knows, one of the earliest examples of the giallo genre that would influence so much that gets done in the genre in the 70s. I've heard that Mario Bava's movie, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, or I think it's called The Evil Eye, is its other name. That's actually considered the first giallo. I haven't seen it yet. It's on my watch list. But Blood and Black Lace, widely regarded as the one that just cemented the formula, or at least the bones of the formula. And having watched it now a couple times and seeing it at the, on the big screen, I do have a couple takeaways about the genre that I think are pretty obvious if you know it, but it's fun to just kind of share. So what this movie is missing is it's missing really the amateur detective element, which again, I haven't seen The Girl Who Knew Too Much, but my understanding is the main character kind of takes that amateur detective role. So in these two movies, The Evil Eye and Blood and Black Lace, Bava has 90% of the formula. But if we're just looking at this movie, which a lot of people say started the giallo formula, there's a traditional cop in this. There's not just a innocent man or woman that gets swept up in a series of murders. Everybody's confined to this modeling studio. All of our female characters are male protagonists who's revealed to be behind the killings at the end. The males that get kind of swept into the assembly line, they're all part of this modeling agency, this modeling group, one way or another. So what this movie doesn't have is what would be just nailed in the great giallos of the 70s, which is that innocent person getting swept up into a series of murders, maybe being a suspect, maybe having to solve the case himself. And for me personally, I love that aspect of the giallo genre. I've talked about Hitchcock before on any of my movie videos, and you'll hear me talk about Hitchcock again, but that's something that Alfred Hitchcock did so incredibly well. You think about North by Northwest, Roger Thornhill, Cary Grant gets swept up and mistaken for somebody else in this whole big scheme. You think about Rear Window, Jimmy Stewart's character. He's just trying to heal his broken foot, but he gets swept into this whole courtyard of murder. And the giallo genre really pulled from that with the amateur detective or the innocent character that has to kind of uncover the murders and really find out who's behind that stuff himself. So that's something that Blood and Black Lace doesn't have. It doesn't make it a lesser movie, but it's something that really makes a traditional giallo. Some other things that just kind of stand out to me when I think about Blood and Black Lace. So this movie's from the mid-60s. Different movie code, different blood and gore kind of culture in film at that time than kind of the no-holds-barred change that would come in the 70s for both Italian and other country films. This movie doesn't have any blood and gore, and that would become really synonymous with the giallo genre. Argento started doing it, Fulci started doing it, Martino started doing it. These Italian directors all started to want to one-up each other, and Fulci really kind of won that battle when he made The New York Ripper, which is just one of the most brutal movies you can ever watch. So what Blood and Black Lace has in terms of kills is definitely a lot of implied violence and memorable kills. These are not just stabbings. These are not just stranglings. But there's a couple things that really stand out to me. First, there is the suit of armor gauntlet the like spiked gauntlet kill. We never see like blood from that. They cut away with a sound effect of the gauntlet, you know, like taking out Nicole, I think, is the model in that scene. They cut away from that. And you hear the sound, but you can kind of picture it in your mind. That's how a lot of Hitchcock movies really approached violence. And some of that was the movie code. I'm sure the Italian movie code was different, if anybody knows, at the time in the 60s. But it's meant to kind of like you picture the horror in your mind. And it's, you know, there's the theory that like what you don't see, you visualize worse, actually. But in the 70s, we know the kills became a huge part of the genre. The makeup, the practical effects, making a memorable kill. And I think while the gauntlet kill in Blood and Black Lace doesn't have blood and gore, I think it's really creative. And the setup to it, to me, is an iconic moment of that film. Probably my favorite sequence in Blood and Black Lace. There's a lot of like green light flooding this studio costume room. There's mannequins around. Things are not organized. And the girl, you know, kind of realizes early in that scene, Nicole, that like somebody's in there with her. She's not alone. And there's a little bit of a chase scene involved. I really like the foreshadowing that Bava does with the suit of armor. Like when she first enters that room, you see the suit of armor off in the corner. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, that's not going to be good. Somebody's in that suit of armor. The scene plays out and you're kind of like, okay, maybe the killer's just going to get her. But there's an awesome moment where she's got the suit of armor behind her and it is like slowly pushed forward in a way that you think somebody's in the suit, like they're stepping towards her. And then it falls on her and the masked killer is behind her. It's just such a good bait and switch moment. That sequence is directed so well by Bava to kind of build out the tension, which is something that so many other Italian filmmakers would do in their Giallo, is build out the tension of a scene and really like get you on the edge of your seat with suspense. One of my favorite moments like that is the key scene in Torso, where she thinks she got the key to fall where she needs it to, and a hand just places it. Tons of tension in that scene from the great Sergio Martino. So I think the other implied severe violence scene is the burn scene, which we see a little bit of, right? We get burn face of the victim. We get her hand, and then we get her face pushed into this fiery red hot metal. If that were made in the 70s, years later, like we'd get a close-up of the skin ripping away and it would be more prolonged. But Bava kind of handles it tastefully with not a lot of gore and like close-ups of the burn really happening. So I think those two scenes are really important. They're not super gory, but they're really unique kills in a movie that is about models. This movie has women in high fashion, women of high society, and they're the victims of this movie. Like that means something in terms of this being considered one of the movies that really established the Giallo formula. Some other things that Blood and Black Lace doesn't necessarily have in terms of like the ultra blood and gore, the amateur detective. There's not really like a supernatural element, which is not in all Giallo, but became a thing in the 70s and beyond. In terms of like Giallo Italian made movies, sometimes there would be a supernatural element, not always, but this doesn't have that. That was expanded on later. And then really like the twist killer ending is not in Blood and Black Lace. We find out like 3/4 of the way through the film that there's two killers. They're the ones that are in love. There's the great scene with the cop and the assembly line of suspects to potentially get picked out, and they're all detained. And really, Blood and Black Lace is unique in the sense that there's two killers that are revealed because one is then given an alibi who's on that assembly line. The cops had the main killer behind all of this, but he really gets out because of his alibi. And then, of course, we know at the end, our two main killers die. Like, everybody dies in this movie. They almost Tarantino it before Tarantino did it in Reservoir Dogs, and I'm sure many other directors that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, I just rewatching this, you know, those were a couple things that stood out to me. I think where Blood and Black Lace is such a beautiful film is all the precedents it set. You have the mass killer. You have interesting camera angles. You have this really critical use of color in the film. I think about Isabella and her early death kind of setting the events in motion of the movie. Like, she has red lipstick, she has a red diary, there's a red phone that's featured really prominently in the modeling suite. And all of that color red around Isabella's death is to imply murder. Bava is using color in that moment and throughout the film with the mannequins and lighting and light flooding into rooms. And I absolutely love it. This is such a great example of why 4K remasters are so hot right now and why I'm addicted to them. When you get to see these really colorful, theatrical, like avant-garde mise-en-scène types of movies in the Giallo genre look as good as they can, you really get to see all the things that filmmaker did to make that movie stand out, and it's something that I just really admire about the genre. Prior to seeing Blood and Black Lace again just a couple days ago, I actually watched Mario Bava's Black Sabbath, his anthology horror movie, and the first skit with the dead woman and the ring that gets stolen and her corpse comes back to haunt the girl who took the ring. That short actually has a scene in the girl who takes the ring's apartment where there's light flooding through, and it really is like a precursor lighting moment to Blood and Black Lace. So if you haven't seen Black Sabbath, I think the first short in that is actually really cool because you can almost get the cinematography vibe before Blood and Black Lace was made in that short. Something else that's critical in the second short, which is called The Telephone, there's a bright red phone with a black receiver. And again, a precursor to the red phone in Blood and Black Lace. Bava's bringing that back. I love how cool those red phones look, especially the one in Black Sabbath with the black-handed receiver. Very, very cool. If I have the opportunity to hunt down an old red rotary phone, I'm going to add it to the collection because it's going to make me think of those early Bava movies. So those are just a couple things I wanted to share. I had an awesome time seeing this on the big screen. Watching a Giallo in a packed theater is such a different experience than watching it at your home. Crowds tend to laugh at Giallo a lot more than I do when I'm either in a theater or at home by myself. I think there's often humor in, just the way Italian movies are directed, the way certain characters deliver their lines or react, the scripts. And when you're watching it with a packed crowd like I did for this movie, the crowd energy is part of the experience, for better or worse. There's times they laugh at things that it drives me nuts. I'm like, why was that funny? Okay. Huh. For example, like any nudity in a Giallo, like the crowd is just like snickering to themselves when the scene's not meant to be funny. But hey, that's me. I'm sitting there just serious and analyzing the movie. But it's cool because there's a lot of energy in the crowd. There's a lot of energy going into the movie. Music Box Chicago has Severin Films set up a merch table so you can leave with a bunch of discs. Definitely bought a bunch from them. And it's just a great experience that I'm going to be going to some more throughout the month of January for January Giallo. So thanks for tuning into this quick little chat about Blood and Black Lace. I think this movie is awesome. It's so well directed. It's so tense. It's very confined, which makes the colors and the rooms and the fashion of the characters just stand out even more. You think about later Giallos, which feature a lot of Europe or a lot of Italy and, really make the scenery part of the film. This movie is not so much about the scenery, but it's about the characters and the things around the room. There's some great set pieces between mannequins and a body hiding under the stairs. Like, this movie is really kind of defined by the color and feel of its objects than a variety of locations, and that's just one of the many things I like about Blood and Black Lace. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button. Feel free to leave some comments if you've seen Blood and Black Lace. What's your favorite part? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching Film Archaeology.